Hey, it's Nathan. Before we start tonight's story, I want you to think about the most boring, thoughtful thing you've ever done for someone you love. Booked an oil change, filled a prescription, scheduled a car detail as a birthday surprise. Now imagine that small act of love, accidentally opening a door you were never supposed to find, into a plan you were never supposed to survive knowing about. That's what happened to a quiet man in Colorado, a man whose whole career was keeping other people alive while surgeons worked, when he sent his wife's car in for a birthday detail and got a phone call 20 minutes later that ended with a question no father should ever hear. Why is your daughter's name written on this? Tonight's story is about the difference between people who love you and people who have simply decided what you're for. It's about how the calmest person in the room is usually the most dangerous one, and how the family that called him the help learned exactly what the help does for a living. Stay with me to the end, because the way this man settles it is something I still think about. Let's get into it. Troy Keaton had spent 19 years being the calmest person in rooms where people were technically dead. He was a cardiovascular perfusionist at Windham Regional Medical Center, the man who sat at the heart-lung machine while surgeons stopped a human heart and trusted him to be the heartbeat in the meantime. Most people at dinner parties had no idea what a perfusionist was, and Troy had learned to enjoy explaining it in one sentence. While the surgeon fixes your heart, my machine is your heart, and I am the machine's brain. Panic, he liked to say, was a luxury for people whose mistakes could be buried in paperwork. His mistakes would be buried in a churchyard, so he simply did not make them. He ran his life the way he ran his pump, on checklists and calm and a memory that filed everything, because on his table, a number you noticed 30 seconds late was a person you lost. He had met Kendall Kfax 12 years earlier at a hospital fundraiser her father sponsored, back when Randolph Kfax was just a name on a banquet banner to him. Kendall was radiant that night, quick and funny, and she seemed to find it exotic that Troy owned exactly one suit and could not name a single yacht club. They married within a year. Their daughter Daisy came 2 years after. And if you ask Troy what he had done right in his life, the answer was 9 years old, missing one front tooth, and swam freestyle like she had a personal grudge against water. Daisy was the kind of kid who narrated her whole day at the dinner table, who kept a shoebox of evidence because she wanted to be a detective or a marine biologist or both, and who had recently informed her father, with great seriousness, that when she made the Olympic team, he would have to hold her towel. The Kfax family was another country, and Troy had a visitor's visa at best. Randolph ran Beacon Executive Health, a concierge medicine group that flew wealthy men to the right specialist, the way other companies couriered documents. Membership started at $50,000 a year, and Randolph liked to open his pitch with the same line every time. Insurance is for people who wait. My clients don't wait. Kendall's mother, Rosamond, curated the family the way she curated her table settings, and had introduced Troy at his own wedding reception as Kendall's husband. He's in the medical field, in the tone you'd use for a man who restocked vending machines in a hospital lobby. Kendall's brother, Baxter, flew the family's other business, Aerovita Medical Transport, 2 sleek air ambulances that moved transplant teams, machine parts for hearts, and occasionally, Troy suspected, clients whose paperwork was thinner than their wallets. And above them all, in the way that some families have a son everyone orbits, there was Blair. Blair Templeton, Kendall's older sister, was the Kfax the other Kfaxes existed for. Widowed young, beautiful in the brittle way of someone who had never once been told no, she had produced the family's one male heir, an 11-year-old named Archie, and Archie was sick. Troy actually liked the kid, which made all of it harder. Archie was a funny, pale boy who loved trains and drew them obsessively, and his kidneys were failing. Focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, the nephrologist said, aggressive, and after 2 years of clinic visits, the word dialysis had arrived in the family group chat like a bomb with a timer on it. The Kfaxes did not respond to it the way normal families do, with fear and casseroles. They responded like a board of directors with a supply problem. At Sunday dinners, Randolph would set down his fork and say things like, "We are not a family that waits on a list built for other people." And Rosamond would touch Blair's wrist and murmur, "We take care of our own, darling, we always have." Troy had assumed that meant money. Money for the best unit. Money to fly Archie anywhere. He would remember, later, exactly how it felt to learn what it actually meant. The birthday plan was Troy's idea, and it was, he would admit, aggressively boring. Kendall was turning 39 on a Saturday. She loved that car, a 2-year-old white Lexus SUV she called her office, and she had been complaining for a month that Daisy's swim bag had made the whole thing smell like a pool deck. So Troy booked the full treatment at Fuentes Detail Company, the best shop in Wyndham, owned by a meticulous, gray-templed man named Dario Fuentes who detailed cars the way Troy ran a bypass, by checklist, corner to corner. The plan was simple. Friday morning, Troy would drop the Lexus with Dario, work a half day, and have it back in the driveway, immaculate, with a ribbon on the mirror before Kendall got home from her tennis league. Daisy was in on it. She had contributed $4 and a hand-drawn coupon good for 1 free car wash forever. Troy dropped the keys at 7:45 and told Dario there was no rush. Do the full thing. Engine bay, seats out, every compartment. The call came at 8:06, 21 minutes. Troy was in the perfusion office restocking a cart when his phone lit up with the shop's number. And the first thing he noticed, the thing his trained brain filed before a single word registered, was Dario's breathing. Fast, shallow, the breathing of a man standing somewhere he did not want to be standing. "Mr. Keaton, sir, I need you to cancel the surprise and come to the shop. Right now, please," Troy asked, evenly, if someone had hit the car. And Dario said, "No, sir, the car is fine," and then said the sentence Troy would hear for the rest of his life. "We pulled the spare tire to clean the well, and there's something sealed under it, vacuum sealed. My guys stopped working. 2 of them asked to go home. I have 3 men standing in my bay right now and nobody will touch it. And sir, I have to ask you something. Why is your daughter's name written on it?" Troy did not remember the drive across town. He remembered the bay, smelling of shampoo and ozone, and 3 grown men standing in a loose half-circle around the open cargo floor of his wife's car, the way people stand around a hole. The spare was out, leaning against the wall. In the shallow well where it had sat, fitted so precisely that it had clearly been measured for the space, lay a heavy-gauge vacuum-sealed pouch, the kind used for sous vide or evidence, and through the clear plastic Troy could see its contents arranged like a kit. Because it was a kit, 2 glass vials of liquid with pharmacy-grade labels, a coil of clear tubing and sealed sterile packages Troy recognized before he was ready to. Pediatric IV cannulas, the small gauge, butterfly needles sized for a child's arm, a zippered document wallet, a cold pack, spent, and on the outside of the pouch, in neat block letters of black paint marker, in handwriting Troy had seen on 12 years of Christmas tags, was written Daisy, and beneath his daughter's name, a date 12 days away. Dario's youngest detailer, a kid of maybe 20, was the one who had found it, and he was sitting on an overturned bucket by the wall, with his cap in his hands, not looking at anyone. "He's got a little girl," Dario said quietly. He saw the needles and the name, and he was done. So was Marco. "I sent them home, sir. I didn't call the police, because I don't know what this is, and it's your wife's car. But I'm going to be honest with you. I have run this shop for 22 years, and I have found guns. I have found cash. I have found things I don't talk about. I have never once wanted to be wrong about something the way I want to be wrong about this." Troy stood over the pouch for a long moment. Then the 19 years took over, the part of him that did not get to shake, and he took out his phone, photographed the pouch in place from 4 angles the way he documented a circuit before a case, put on a pair of nitrile gloves from the dispenser on Dario's wall, and lifted it out. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed more than anything he had ever carried. He did not open it in the bay. He asked Dario for 20 minutes and the use of his office, and Dario, who understood men like himself, closed the door and stood guard outside it with a shop towel over his shoulder like a sentry. Troy laid the pouch on the desk, slit the seal with a box knife along one edge, and unpacked it item by item, photographing each thing next to a tape measure, because some part of his brain had already understood that this desk was a chain of custody now. The vials first. Midazolam. An injectable sedative, pharmacy labeled, lot numbers intact. The kind of thing that does not exist outside a licensed supply chain. The kind of thing he signed for at work with a witness. Then the cannulas, the tubing, sterile dressings, a bottle of chewable motion sickness gummies with a printed label from no pharmacy he had ever heard of. Then the document wallet. And this is where Troy Keaton, who had kept his hands steady through 900 open hearts, sat down in Dario Fuentes' squeaking office chair because his knees had stopped agreeing to hold him. A laboratory report, printed on the letterhead of a private lab in Denver, dated 3 weeks earlier. Patient name, Daisy M. Keaton, age 9. Blood type, HLA typing, cross-match panel. His daughter's blood, drawn, typed, and matched, and Troy had never been told. He read the date again, and his memory, the filing cabinet memory, delivered the answer with sickening speed. 3 weeks ago, the sports physical Kendall had taken Daisy to while Troy was on call, the one at a private clinic because, Kendall said, the pediatrician was booked out and the swim league needed the form. Daisy had come home with a lollipop and a Band-Aid in the crook of her arm and said, "They took like a whole bunch of blood for a form," and Troy had said, without looking up from the dishwasher, "That's weird, bug." And the moment had sunk to the bottom of a busy week the way moments do. Under the lab report, there was a folded itinerary, printed, no airline, a tail number, and under that, a passport. He opened it to the photo page. His daughter's face looked up at him, her school picture smile, above a name that was not hers. The passport was Guatemalan. The name under Daisy's photograph read Dahlia Marie Kesson, born the same day as Daisy, and the document had the soft, handled corners of something real, not a prop. Troy sat very still in the little office and did what he did at the pump when an alarm sounded. He went around the circuit. Sedatives dosed for a child's weight, pediatric IV kit, a blood panel that existed for exactly one reason anywhere in medicine: you draw a cross-match when you are matching a donor to a recipient. An itinerary with a tail number he already suspected belonged to one of Baxter's Aerovita jets. A passport that made his daughter someone else, somewhere else. And a date, 12 days out, written over her name in his wife's block letters. The 8th grade teacher handwriting Rosamond had drilled into both her daughters. His mind kept trying the innocent doors. A game, a misunderstanding. Some elaborate customs workaround for a family vacation he hadn't been told about. Every door opened onto the same room. Archie needed a kidney. Daisy had been typed and matched. And nobody had asked her father, because her father was not part of the plan. Her father was the complication the plan was built around. Troy's phone buzzed. Kendall. He looked at it ring the way you'd look at a snake on a path, then answered on the 4th buzz with a voice he took off a shelf, the voice he used to tell a resident everything was fine while his hands worked a problem. Hey, no, just restocking, long morning. Yes, tonight was still on for dinner at her parents'. He listened to his wife laugh about something her doubles partner had said, and he watched his own hand lie flat and easy on the desk beside a passport with their daughter's face in it, and he understood something about himself that he filed without emotion. He was not going to scream. He was not going to drive home and swing. Screaming was for people who needed the other side to know they'd been caught, and Troy had spent 19 years learning that you never let the field know the pump has seen the problem before you know exactly what you're going to do about it. He told Kendall he loved her. He hung up. Then he turned to the kit and rebuilt it. This was the first decision, and everything that came after ran through it. If the pouch disappeared, the plan would not stop. It would simply dive, reschedule, buy a new kit, and he would never see it coming again. So the pouch had to go home. He photographed everything a final time, then repacked it in order, and here he allowed himself one act of sabotage that no one would see. At the hospital that afternoon, in the perfusion lab where he had signing authority over a controlled cabinet and 20 years of unquestioned access, Troy drew the midazolam out of both vials with a filtered needle through the septum and replaced it with bacteriostatic saline, matched to the milliliter. The vials never left his sight. The tamper rings stayed pristine, and the kit that went back under the spare tire that evening, re-vacuum sealed with the machine Dario kept for storing winter shamma, was identical to the gram, except that the only thing anyone could now inject his daughter with was salt water. Dario watched him work in silence and then said, "I was a young man in another country once, and I know what it looks like when somebody decides a thing will be handled. Whatever you need from me, it's yours. And this shop has no cameras when you need it to have no cameras." Troy shook his hand and told him the truth. "What I need is for you to have done a beautiful detail and nothing else." The ribbon went on the mirror. Kendall came home at 5 and cried actual tears at how the car smelled. and Daisy presented her coupon with two hands like a court herald, and Troy stood in his driveway with his arm around his wife and grinned like a man in an insurance commercial. And if you had passed the house, you would have said, "There is the luckiest family on the street." At her parents' house that night, he watched everything through new glass. He watched Rosamond seat Blair at Randolph's right hand like a co-regent. He watched Archie push food around his plate, gray around the mouth, a good kid getting sicker on schedule, and felt the awful double vision of loving the boy and knowing what was planned in his name. He watched Randolph propose a toast to family, to doing what others won't, and watched Kendall raise her glass without a flicker. And he watched his wife's mother lean toward Kendall in the kitchen doorway when they thought the men were talking golf, and heard 4 words that turned the last of his doubt to ash. Rosamond said, quietly, "Is the packet ready?" And Kendall said, "It's in the car." He began, that Monday, to take his marriage apart the way he'd been taught to take apart a failed circuit, without anger, joint by joint, keeping every piece. He bought a voice recorder the size of a matchbook and a phone that lived in his locker at work. He pulled 2 years of statements from the joint account and found the first stitch of the seam within an hour, because the Kfaxes were arrogant, and arrogant people are lazy. 14 months earlier, Kendall had opened a wellness savings account with her mother as co-signer, and through it, in tidy monthly increments, dressed up as tennis club dues and a redone powder room, $190,000 had walked out of the marriage and into an entity called Cypress Ridge Wellness LLC, registered to a mail drop in Scottsdale. The same LLC, he found after 2 more nights, paid the lease on the private clinic where Daisy's sports physical had happened, a Beacon Executive Health affiliate with no sign on the door. And the same LLC had wired, in 3 tranches, $410,000 to a surgical group in Baja California called the Playa Serena Surgical Institute. Medical Director 1, Dr. Osmond Krell, an American transplant surgeon who had surrendered his California license in 2019 in lieu of prosecution, and who now performed, according to his Serene website, destination renal procedures for select international families. Select. Troy sat in his car in the hospital parking garage at 1 in the morning, reading that word, until it stopped being a word. The question that would not resolve was Kendall. He needed to know whether his wife was a hostage to her family or a shareholder in it, and on Thursday he got his answer. She thought he was on call. He was in fact parked 40 feet from her Lexus outside Blair's house with a coffee going cold, watching his wife and her sister at the kitchen island through the window like a stranger. And when Kendall came out, she sat in the car with the engine off and made a phone call, and the burner he had taped under her seat's rail, dialed in and listening, caught all of it. "It's handled," she said. "He books her stuff for the 22nd. The swim invitational is the cover. I told you, he works a double that weekend. He'll wave us off at the door." Pause. "I know. Mom, I know." Pause. And then Kendall Keaton, née Kfax, said the sentence her husband would replay at every hearing, deposition, and sleepless 3 a.m. for the rest of his life. "She's 9. She'll heal fast, and honestly, she'll never even know what it was for. We tell her appendix. We tell him appendix." Krell says the scar's practically the same spot. Everyone keeps their life. It's one afternoon, and this family owes Blair a debt, and my daughter can pay it as easily as anyone. My daughter can pay it. Troy drove home, said goodnight to that same daughter, read her the next chapter of a book about a shipwreck, and stood in the dark hallway outside her door for a long time, doing the arithmetic of exactly how a man wins this war without his child ever knowing there was one. He almost missed the part of the story that turned out to matter most, and it was Skylar who handed it to him. Baxter's daughter was 15, a watchful, sardonic kid who moved through Kfax gatherings with headphones around her neck, like a diplomat's translator, and who had always liked Troy for the simple reason that he spoke to her like a person. 2 nights after the phone call, she texted him, "Uncle T, weird question. When you have surgery, is it normal to not be allowed to see your own records?" Troy called her, kept it light, asked what was up, and Skylar, in the flat voice teenagers use for the things that scare them most, told him about her appendix. Summer of 2019, when she was 8. Except she'd been thinking, because of Archie, because everyone kept whispering about kidneys, and she'd looked up appendix scars, and hers was wrong. Wrong side, wrong shape. a long faded line on her left flank that the internet said was not where anyone's appendix had ever been. She remembered a house with a tile fountain and being carried to a plane while the sky was still dark. She remembered her grandfather in a bathrobe in a room with machines. In the same house, that same summer, everyone saying Grandpa Randolph is just tired. And she remembered, this year, telling her doctor at a school physical that she was fine except sometimes her back ached, and the doctor frowning at an ultrasound for a long time, and her father in the hallway afterward, speaking to the doctor in the voice he used for staff. "Uncle T," Skylar said, and her voice did not change at all, which was the worst part. "I only have one kidney. I looked at the screen when they scanned me. I counted, and I think I know where the other one went, because Grandpa stopped being tired in 2019, and nobody in this family will say the word transplant to me, and now they've all started being extremely nice to Daisy." Troy did not sleep after Skylar's call. He sat in the garage with a legal pad, because paper cannot be subpoenaed from a cloud by people with better lawyers than yours, and he wrote 2 columns, what I know, what I can prove. The first column was long and monstrous. The second column was shorter, and every line of it had a date, a source, and a plan for where it would live. This was the discipline that separated him from every raging husband who had ever blown a case by kicking a door. A fact he could not prove did not exist. A fact he could prove was ammunition, and ammunition you fire early is ammunition wasted. At 2 in the morning, he called the one person in the Kfax orbit he trusted completely, and asked her to do something almost unforgivable, and to tell no one, least of all her father. Skylar's medical records took 4 days to surface, and they surfaced the way everything in that family surfaced, through a side door. She was 15, old enough in Colorado to request her own records with a guardian's signature, and her mother's sister in Oregon, a school teacher named her guardian in an unused clause of a custody agreement nobody had read since the divorce, provided one. What came back from the children's hospital was thin, and its thinness was the evidence. A referral for an appendectomy in June of 2019, and then nothing. No operative report, no pathology, no discharge summary. The file simply skipped from a consultation to a follow-up 8 weeks later, as if the surgery had happened in a place that did not send records, which, Troy now understood, was precisely the case. But the school sports physical from this spring was there, and its imaging note read like a flare in the dark. Solitary left kidney, compensatory hypertrophy, patient reports remote appendectomy, scar noted at left flank, atypical for appendectomy. Correlation advised. Some honest radiologist, somewhere, had looked at a screen, frowned, and written the truth in the passive voice, and the truth had sat in a file for 5 months, waiting for someone to need it. Troy photographed every page against his kitchen counter at midnight, returned the copies to the envelope, and mailed them back to Oregon, and in his garage ledger, in the column of things he could prove, he wrote, "They have done this before," and underlined it once, because underlining it twice would have been panic. The near miss came on a Wednesday, and it taught Troy that his margin was thinner than he had believed. He came home from a liver case to find Kendall signing Daisy out of a follow-up, the private clinic again, the one with no sign, just labs this time, honey. The invitational needs an updated panel. It was already done. Daisy was in the kitchen with a cartoon Band-Aid in the crook of her arm for the second time in a month, eating crackers, entirely unbothered, and Troy stood in his own doorway holding his keys and understood that a cross-match has a shelf life, and that somewhere a surgeon had asked for fresher numbers, and that his daughter's blood was being couriered to people who had already scheduled her. He smiled. He asked Daisy if they'd used the butterfly needle, the little one, and she said yes, and that she got a sticker for not flinching. And he said, "Tough kid." And some part of him, the part at the pump, noted with detached horror how good he had become at this, at standing in a kitchen inside a conspiracy against his own child, praising her for being easy to draw blood from. That night he added a line to the ledger. "The clock is not mine. Assume the date moves." And within a week, it did. The burner under the seat rail caught Kendall and Blair rescheduling around Krell's calendar. The 22nd, instead of the following month, he has a window. We take the window. And Troy, listening on a bench outside the hospital with his lunch untouched, thought, "Thank you. A moved date is a nervous operation. Nervous operations make mistakes, and every mistake is mine now." He used the shrinking calendar the way he used every countdown, to sequence. There were things he needed that took days, and he lined them up like meds on a tray. He needed the tail number confirmed, so on Sunday he took Daisy to watch planes at Wyndham Executive Airfield, a thing they had genuinely done since she was 4, and while she narrated an entire imaginary air traffic emergency into a churro, her father photographed the Aerovita hangar with a long lens, both jets, both tails, and the fuel truck's logbook hanging on its hook in the open bay door. Because fixed-base operators are small towns, and nobody questions a dad with a camera and a kid with a churro. The itinerary's tail number matched the newer jet, the one Baxter called 22 Papa. He needed Krell's face, so he paid $90 for a Playa Serena virtual consultation under a burner identity, a middle manager asking delicately about a knee replacement for his mother, and recorded 30 minutes of Dr. Osmond Krell being charming, unhurried, and fluent in the grammar of people who do not want questions asked. We handle families, not cases, and discretion here is not a service, it is the architecture. Troy watched the recording twice. It was the voice of a man who had done this so many times that it bored him. That, more than anything, was the thing Troy carried into the last week, the boredom in the surgeon's voice, the administrative calm of an industry, and the knowledge that his daughter was somewhere in that man's calendar, between a golf reservation and a board call. The strangest part, he would say later, was how good the last ordinary days were. That is the thing no one tells you about living inside a countdown. The sunsets don't stop. Daisy had a swim meet and dropped 2 seconds in the 100 free and came off the wall looking for him in the stands. And he was there. He was always there, pointing at her split on the board like it was a lottery number. Kendall made her grandmother's short ribs on Sunday, and the house smelled like rosemary. And Troy ate 2 helpings and told her honestly that it was perfect, because it was, and because the woman who made it was 2 people, and one of them had been his wife for 12 years, and the other one had said my daughter can pay it into a phone in a parked car. He had stopped trying to reconcile them. That was the piece of him that broke quietly that month and never fully mended, the discovery that a person can love you at dinner and inventory your child before bed, that both can be true, that the woman crying happily over a detailed car and the woman with the paint marker were the same steady hand. In the garage ledger, on a night when the house was asleep, he allowed himself a single unprofessional line at the bottom of the page. I am not losing a wife. I am recovering a hostage from a woman wearing her face. Then he crossed it out, because sentiment is a leak, and leaks sink cases. But he pressed hard enough writing it that the words stayed legible in the grooves. And 18 months later, when a federal evidence technician photographed the ledger page by page, that crossed-out line was the one the prosecutor put on the screen for the jury and left there, silent, for an entire minute. Archie crashed on the second Friday, and the crash rearranged everyone's mask. It was a fluid overload event, the kind that ends with a boy who loves trains being carried out of a lake house to an ambulance while his grandmother stands on the porch composing the story she will tell about it, and it moved the family from planning to fervor. Dialysis started that weekend, a catheter in a small chest, and Troy, who had spent his career one curtain away from pediatric misery, drove to the Children's Hospital with Kendall and sat in the family lounge and watched the Kfaxes convert grief into resolve before his eyes. Blair came out of the unit with mascara intact, which told Troy she had cried earlier, privately, on schedule, and announced to the assembled family, he is not living like this for 2 years on some list. And Randolph put his hand on her shoulder and said, no, he is not, and looked, for one unguarded quarter second, directly at Kendall. Not at Troy, at Kendall. That quarter second was the whole conspiracy in miniature, the glance of a chairman to the account manager handling the acquisition, and Troy caught it the way he caught a bubble in a line, without appearing to look at all. On the drive home, Kendall cried real tears for Archie, hooked to a machine, poor Blair, and then, exhausted, said something she believed was safe to say out loud. It just makes you realize, she said, you'd do anything for family. Anything. And her husband, who understood exactly what anything meant in her mother tongue, reached over, squeezed her hand, and said, I know you would, and filed the sentence, time-stamped, in the ledger of things that were true in 2 directions. The summit happened 4 days later at the lake house, billed in the family calendar as a planning weekend for Rosamond's gala, and Troy was not invited, which was the point of everything. Husbands who restock vending machines do not attend strategy, but Kendall's phone attended, riding in her tote in a kitchen where the acoustics were excellent, and the burner's sister unit, taped inside the Lexus, caught the drive-up conversation besides. What the recordings assembled, across 6 hours of coffee refills and 1 catered lunch, was the operation entire, spoken aloud by people so certain of their privacy that they used names. Krell's window on the 22nd. The invitational cover. Rosamond had already forwarded the fake meat registration to 3 other swim moms for verisimilitude, a touch she was audibly proud of. The flight nurse who would meet them at the airfield. She's done 4 of these, Baxter said. She's a vault. The recovery house in Cabo, with the good sea view for Daisy's week of appendix recovery. The child psychologist Blair had on retainer, in case Daisy asks questions afterward. And Rosamond's single note of caution, delivered in the voice she used for seating charts. We keep Troy exactly as happy and exactly as tired as he is. He covers the weekend. He notices nothing. He has never once noticed anything. Laughter. Not cruel laughter even, which was somehow worse. Fond laughter. The laughter of a family confident that the animal in question was well-fed and docile. And then Randolph's voice, closer to the phone, older and lower. The only moment in 6 hours that had no performance in it at all. We did it once and this family is still standing. We do it once more and we are done with hospitals for a generation. Nobody outside this porch will ever understand what it costs to hold a family together. And nobody outside this porch ever has to. Troy listened to all of it twice, alone in his car in the hospital garage, and what he felt was not rage anymore. Rage had burned off weeks ago like fog. What he felt was the cold, structural satisfaction of a man watching a confession assemble itself, and one sharp, unexpected stab of something like grief, because Daisy loved that porch, and the people on it, and had drawn most of them birthday cards with whales on them, and not one voice in 6 hours, not one, had said the word no. He told Dario, because he needed one civilian, and he chose the man who had already proven he could stand next to the thing without flinching. They met at the shop after hours, the bay smelling of wax, and Troy told him what was under the spare tire he had resealed, and what it was for, and what was going to happen at an airfield in 9 days if nothing broke. Dario listened with his arms folded, looked for a while at the empty stall where the Lexus had sat, and then said, "My youngest detailer, the one who found it, his name is Raphael. He has not slept right since. He thinks he maybe touched something evil and did nothing. When it is over, I want to be able to tell him what the something was, and that the morning he refused to keep working was the morning it started to die. Can I do that?" Troy said yes. Then Dario opened the drawer under his register, took out the shop's appointment book, and slid it across, and Troy saw that on the day of the detail, in the column next to the white Lexus, Dario had already written, in his careful blocky English, "Found sealed package spare tire well 8:04 a.m., called owner 8:06. Nobody touched it after, D. Fuentes," and had signed it, like a man who had understood from the first hour that someday a courtroom might want to know, and had quietly made himself the first witness. Troy looked at that humble, devastating line of handwriting, evidence born out of nothing but an honest man's instinct, and thought, they never counted people like this man in their arithmetic. That was the whole hole in the plan. They priced everything and counted no one. The money finished the picture, and the money was Rosamond's masterpiece, which is why it became her undoing. Cypress Ridge Wellness LLC was not a shell so much as a museum of shells, and once Troy had the account numbers from the co-signed statements, the architecture unfolded like a wiring diagram, because the Kfaxes had made the one mistake available to people who have never been audited. They had been consistent. The same LLC that paid Krell had, over 6 years, paid for Randolph's executive retreats in 2019, the jet's maintenance through a leasing sister company, the no-sign clinic's rent, and, in a detail that made even Andre's forensic accountant whistle through her teeth, a monthly stipend to a Guatemala City documents broker invoiced as translation services, which is how a 9-year-old from Colorado comes to have a lived-in passport under the name Dahlia Marie Kesson. Every invoice was polite, every memo line was plausible, and every one of them, laid end to end, described a machine for moving children's organs upward through a family tree, dressed as wellness. Troy assembled it all into a single indexed binder, the way he built a pump for a complex case, every line labeled, every connection traceable with one finger. Because he had decided the person he was really building it for was a juror in the second row 18 months from now. A tired woman with 2 kids who had never heard of a perfusionist. And when she followed his finger from a tennis club memo line to a surgeon's fee schedule, she would understand it in one motion, and she would not forgive it. He finished the binder on a Thursday at 4 in the morning, sat back, and realized he had reached the edge of what a private citizen could do without becoming the crime himself. What sat on his workbench was a case. What it needed now was a badge, and he knew exactly which badge. And he knew the man wearing it happened to owe his father's heartbeat to the steadiness of Troy Keaton's hands. Troy met Andre Villanueva on a Saturday, at a gym that smelled like rubber and effort, the way they had met every few weeks for 10 years. Andre was a supervisory special agent with Homeland Security investigations out of the Denver field office, and he owed Troy nothing except the small matter of his father's life, which Troy's pump had carried for 6 hours in 2016, while a surgical team rebuilt the old man's heart. They had become friends the ordinary way after that, spotting each other's bench press, complaining about their knees. Troy waited until they were alone by the racks and then said, "I need 20 minutes of the federal agent version of you, and I need you to hear all of it before you say a single word." In the parking lot, over the hood of Andre's truck, Troy laid it out with the flat completeness of a shift handoff. The kit, photographed, the lab report, the passport, the LLC and the wires, the recorded call, Skylar's kidney, and the grandfather whose fatigue had resolved in the summer of 2019. Andre listened without moving, and when it was over he looked at his friend for a moment and said, "You switched the vials before you called me, didn't you?" Troy said, "I sterilized the risk to my kid. You'd have done it in the same hour." Andre exhaled, took out his phone and said, "What you have is conspiracy, wire fraud, document fraud, and a planned violation of a statute most people don't know exists, buying and selling human organs, and if that plane so much as taxis with your daughter on it, kidnapping across an international line." Then he said the thing Troy had been waiting 9 days to hear another adult say out loud. "We're not going to spook them. We're going to let this family drive their whole operation onto federal ground at altitude 0 and take everything." What Troy learned in the next week was that his in-laws had done the one thing worse than being evil. They had been evil repeatedly, and repetition leaves a wake. Andre's team found Dr. Ophelia Ruskin in an afternoon, the pediatric transplant nephrologist at Children's who had evaluated Archie 10 months earlier. She had documented, in careful clinical language, a meeting in which the family had inquired about directed living donation from a minor cousin, had been told that no ethics board on earth permits a child living donor, and had responded not with grief but with logistics, at which point Randolph Kfax had asked her, verbatim and in front of a social worker, what it would cost to make the committee smaller. Dr. Ruskin had refused, flagged the file, and heard nothing since, because the Kfaxes had simply gone shopping in a different country. She read Andre's warrant, took off her glasses, and said, "I've been waiting for someone to come ask me about that family for 10 months. What do you need?" The wires gave them Krell. Krell's own seized records, in time, gave them 2019, an invoice from Playa Serena to Cypress Ridge Wellness for what was billed as a family wellness retreat, itemized, 1 pediatric donor nephrectomy, and the Baja tail logs of Baxter's jet, matching Skylar's remembered summer to the day. The house with the tile fountain was real. It had an operating room in what the plans called a wine cellar. The hardest conversations were not with agents. Detective Paula Reingold of the Wyndham Police, folded in quietly because a local officer would be needed on the day, asked Troy the question the prosecutors would ask later. "Why not confront your wife, Mr. Keaton? Why sit at her table for 3 more weeks?" And Troy gave her the answer that made her stop writing. "Because a confrontation saves my daughter once, this month, from this kit. It does not save her from a family with jets and passports who has already done this to one of their own children and called it appendicitis for 6 years. You do not clamp one line of a bleed and call it surgery. You find every source, or you have done nothing." His attorney, a precise, unhurried woman named Bettina Nakata, filed nothing, changed nothing, and prepared everything: a custody petition and protective orders written and holstered, time to be walked into a courthouse in the same hour as the arrests. And Skylar, who had started it all with a text, sat across from a forensic interviewer with her mother's estranged sister on a video call from Oregon and told her story from the beginning and asked exactly one question when it was over. "When you arrest my dad, can I not be at school? I don't want to get pulled out of class. I want to already be gone." The 22nd arrived, dressed as an ordinary Friday. The cover story had been laid so smoothly that Troy almost admired it. A 3-day swim invitational in San Diego. Girls' trip, grandma's treat. Daisy vibrating with excitement about an ocean she believed she was going to see. Troy worked his advertised double shift, which was real, approved, and staffed, because everything about him had to be exactly where the Kfaxes believed it was. At 6:10 a.m., he stood in his own driveway in his scrubs and waved as the white Lexus backed out, his wife at the wheel, his mother-in-law in the passenger seat, his daughter in the back with a stuffed orca named Steve, and the kit under the spare tire transmitting on a battery the FBI's technical unit had guaranteed for 72 hours. It was, he said later, the single hardest 90 seconds of his life, performed for an audience of 2 women who believed he was a fool, and 1 child who believed she was going to the beach, waving until the car turned at the end of the street, with agents already ahead of it, behind it, and above it. Daisy waved back the whole way down the block. That part never made it into any report. They did not fly commercial, of course. The Lexus drove 40 minutes to Wyndham Executive Airfield, through the chain-link gate Baxter's keycard opened at 7:02, and onto the apron where an Aerovita jet sat fueled. Flight planned for Cabo San Lucas with a medical crew manifest, and there the plan achieved its final, self-incriminating form. Baxter was aboard doing the walk-around paperwork. The flight nurse on the manifest was a Playa Serena employee who had entered the country on Wednesday. And down the stairs, silver-haired and cheerful in a linen jacket, came Dr. Osmond Krell himself, who liked to supervise retrievals personally, and who was captured on 3 cameras shaking Rosamund Kfax's hand on United States soil beside a cooler he should never have been standing near. Kendall lifted Daisy's duffel out of the trunk. Rosamund lifted the spare tire cover. And the moment her hand closed on the kit, the airfield turned inside out. Vehicles through the gate, vests on the apron, rotors somewhere overhead, and Andre Villanueva walking up the line of them with his badge out, saying the words, "Conspiracy to acquire a human organ for valuable consideration," while 2 agents came between Daisy and every other adult on that tarmac like a door closing. A female agent in plain clothes knelt, said, "Hey, your dad asked me to bring you to him. He's right there." And Daisy, 9 years old, holding a stuffed orca, looked past her and saw Troy, not at the hospital at all, stepping out of the second SUV, and ran to him across federal pavement. And the only thing she was scared of that entire morning, she told him on the drive home, was that they were probably going to miss the flight. The Kfax family learned, over the following 18 months, what it costs when the quiet man does the paperwork. Randolph Kfax was sentenced to 16 years, the Oregon statute stacked with wire fraud and, devastatingly, the 2019 counts, because Skylar's kidney turned his family man mythology into a prior act in front of a jury that included 4 parents. Rosamund received 9 years, the jury unmoved by pearls. Baxter lost his certificates, his company, and 11 years, and the worst sentence he received was not from the judge. It was from a 15-year-old's victim impact statement, read in a steady voice, that ended, "My father priced me like a part, and I want the record to show I found out what I cost." Dr. Osmond Krell, whose serene website had promised discretion, discovered that federal prosecutors also value thoroughness and will die in custody. Blair Templeton, who had known, was convicted on the conspiracy and served 3 years, and Archie went to live with his father's family in Vermont, where, freed from the dynasty that had been poisoning its own children to save him, he did the ordinary miraculous thing. He rose on the pediatric list and received a deceased donor kidney 14 months later. Kendall pled. Her allocution took 4 minutes, and she cried, and Troy, in the second row, listened to his wife of 12 years explain that her family was a weather system she had never learned to leave, and felt, of all things, the cold professional recognition of a familiar failure mode. She received 6 years and the termination of her parental rights, and Daisy, who knows the true story now in the careful, complete, age-honest form a child psychologist helped Troy build, sends her mother a drawing every Christmas, because, as she told her father with a 9-year-old's terrifying clarity, being done with someone and being cruel to them are different things, Dad. And the ending Troy Keaton chose for himself is the reason this story gets told at all. 2 years later, on an ordinary Tuesday, the surgical schedule at Wyndham Regional listed a pediatric case, a kidney transplant, deceased donor, recipient a boy of 13, and the perfusion assignment sheet, because transplant cases at Wyndham keep a perfusionist on standby, listed T. Keaton. Someone in scheduling caught the name match and offered, delicately, to swap him. Troy declined. He was there, gowned and calm at his machine. The entire time his former nephew by marriage was open on the table. 1 floor above the courtroom ordered restitution account that was quietly paying the boy's medical bills from his grandfather's liquidated estate. And when Archie woke up, the first face from the old life that he saw was Troy's. And Troy told him the only thing he had ever wanted any child in that family to hear. You don't owe anybody anything. Get well and go be a kid. Then he went home, made spaghetti, quizzed Daisy for a biology test, and slept the whole night through, the way you sleep when every line is clamped, every count is correct, and the field, at last, is dry. So that's the story of Troy Keaton, and I want to be straight with you about why it stays with me. It is not the tarmac, or the sentences, or even that unbearable image of a man waving his daughter down the driveway toward a trap he had already disarmed. It's the vials. Think about what that moment actually was. A father alone in a lab at 1 in the morning, holding proof that the people who shared his table had priced his little girl like a spare part, and instead of burning the world down that night, he swapped sedative for saline and put the horror back exactly where he found it, because rage would have saved her once, and patience saved her permanently. That is a kind of love we don't make movies about, the love that files things, that documents, that waits. And here's the lesson I'd pull out of it for the rest of us, because most of us will never find a kit under a spare tire, thank God. Pay attention to how your partner's family talks about what people are for. Listen for the language of assets where there should be the language of affection, because the family that says we take care of our own without ever asking its own what they want is not a family, it's an inventory. Watch how they treat the members with the least power, the kids, the in-laws, the quiet ones, because that is the treatment with your name on it eventually. And if the day ever comes when you find the unthinkable in the trunk of your ordinary life, remember the perfusionist's rule. Panic is a luxury. Evidence is love with a spine. If this story hit you the way it hit me, share it with somebody who thinks the calm ones aren't paying attention, and I'll see you in the next one. This has been Nathan. Take care of the people you're for.